We continue now at the top of Daf Tzadi Hey Amud Beis Mesechet Kesuvos. This is Kesuvos Daf 95b. On the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing what happens in a situation where there is nechasim b'nei chorin, there is free property, but that free property is ruined. So in such a situation, is a creditor allowed to collect from property from purchasers from the liened property? So the Gemara says, "V'hamaisim b'chol yom," but that happens all the time. Isn't it obvious that you can collect mishabdi? Rashi says, "V'hamaisim b'chol yom." The dayanin donin dekevan dishtadif b'nei chori. That the judge say that once the b'nei chorin, once the property that's free, that's by the debtor, once that property is ruined, taref mishabdi. So the creditor is allowed to collect from the chasim mishubadim. And the Gemara brings a proof from an incident. There was a certain individual, so he gave over his orchard. He mortgaged over his orchard to his friend for 10 years. In other words, means to say that he owed this person money, and so for 10 years this person would get to work the orchard and take the fruits of the orchard as payback for what he was owed. Rashi says, Pardesa Kerem, it's a vineyard. L'eser shanim she'ochlena eser shanim. In other words, he would consume this vineyard for 10 years, v'tachzor l'baylim below mos, and then he would return it to the original owner, and that would be the way he was going to get paid back. The chasav lei b'mishlam shnai ilain teipa garadin below kesef. He basically wrote him that after 10 years, then what's going to happen is this land will go back, and that will be the end. That will be considered like the debt is paid off. So that's what they arranged in terms of this particular vineyard. L'eser shnin, again, that was for 10 years. The kosh l'chamesh shnin, but then what happened was it aged, the vineyard aged, and it became ruined after already 5 years, so the person really never got paid back. V'yasa l'kamayu d'Rabbanan, so then he came in front of the Rabbanan, v'kos v'lei tirfa, and so they wrote from a shtar that allowed him to collect from the chasim mishubadim. So you have exactly this case. You have a situation where there was nechasim b'nei chorin that was being used to pay off the debt. Then that particular nechasim b'nei chorin, the vineyard, was ruined, and he was allowed to collect from the chasim mishubadim. And so the Gemara says, Hasam Nami, no, they're also, just like we said on the previous Amud, Inuhu Dafsidu Anafshayu, they're the purchasers, it's their own loss. They should realize, everyone should realize that something like a vineyard is going to age, and if they're going to buy property from this person who owes money, it's obvious that the creditor is going to come after them. Kevan Dahaviyadi de Pardesa Avidikish, since it is known that vineyards are things that age and they go bad, Lo Iboilu Lamizvan, they shouldn't have bought that property from somebody who owed money to creditors, and therefore it is only their own fault. And the Gemara says, V'hilchas, and the halacha indeed is, Ishtadif b'nei chori, that if the property that's b'nei chorin, if the free property is ruined, Tarfa mi mishabdi, so then one does collect from the nechasim mishubadim. And the Gemara continues, Amar Abaya says, Nechasai lech v'acharayich leploni. Let's say a person says, I'm going to give my property to you, to a particular woman, and then after you get the property, after you die, then it's going to go to so-and-so. V'yamda v'nisa. So then what happens is this woman, she's a single woman, she goes ahead and she gets married. So the halacha in general is, Ba lokeach havid. The husband of a wife, he's considered like a lokeach of her property, and it actually goes from her now, instead of going to the person it was promised to, it actually goes to the husband. V'yein la'acharayich b'makom ba'al klum, and the acharayich, this other person who was promised the property, he's not going to get anything because the husband takes precedence in this situation. What happens while she is a married woman and it transfers to the husband, that is going to be final, and this other person will not get anything. And the Gemara says, Keman, so this psak of Abaye, who does it follow? Ki haitana de Tanya, it follows the Tana of the following brayso, so we're going to see in a moment, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. And the case over here is Nechasai lech v'acharayich leploni. Again, I'm giving my property to you, and afterwards it should go to so-and-so. Yarad harishon umachar. Now what happens in this case is that the person gave it to individual number one, and individual number one goes ahead and sells the property. So the halacha is hasheni motzi miyad halakuchos. So the halacha is, according to the Tanakam, according to Rebbe, that the second person, the acharayich, is actually allowed to take it away from the lakuchos. He was promised the property, he can take it from the lakuchos. Divrei Rebbe, that is the opinion of Rebbe. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, no, ein l'sheni elamash shaya rishon. That rishon, when he sold it, it was his property. Now the sheni ends up losing out. Anything that was in the possession of the rishon, whatever is left over by the rishon, so then that can be inherited later by the sheni, but anything that was sold cannot be taken by the sheni. And so you see Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is a very similar halacha to Abaya. In other words, just like in that case of Abaya, where the woman gets married, it then goes to her husband and doesn't go to the acharayich, to the other individual. So to over here, when it's sold, it doesn't go to the acharayich, it doesn't go to the other individual. But the Gemara continues, Umi Amar Abaya Hachi, but does Abaya really say that? Does he really paskin like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel? Amar Abaya, but didn't Abaya say, Ezehu Rasha Aram, what's considered a Rasha who acts in a sneaky manner? Zahamesi Eitza Limchor ben Chasim, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. That's anyone who gives advice to sell property along the psak of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Anyone who does like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, that's a Rasha Aram, to go sell the property when really it was promised to somebody else. So how could Abaya say in this case that she gets married and it goes to her husband? And to that the Gemara answers, no, it is a Rasha, but that's the halacha. Mika Martina say, did Abai say she should get married and transfer the property? He didn't say that. Nisas Kamar, he said if she gets married, it transfers, but it could still very well be that the person is considered a Rasha Aram. And the Gemara continues, V'yamar Abaya, and Abaya says, again, a similar case, Nechasai lech v'acharayach leploni, he promises the property is going to you, and then it's going to go after you, it's going to go to somebody else. Umachra, and then she goes ahead and she sells the property. Vamesa, and then she goes ahead and then she dies. So habal motzi miyad halakuchos. So now the husband, he's allowed to take from the lakuchos. The husband has a right; he's considered a purchaser that can take from the lakuchos. V'acharayach miyad bal, but then the acharayach, the one who was promised to, so he's able to take it from the husband. V'lokeach miyad acharayach, and then the lokeach, the one that it was sold to, he's allowed to take it from the acharayach. Umukminon lekulu biyada de lokeach. And the Gemara says, Abai says that in the end, it really is going to go to the lokeach. And Rashi over here says, V'yamar Abai nechasai loch lekamon muki lahashmaita. So later on we're going to say why over here suddenly does it not go straight to the husband like it did before in Abai's first case. And the reason is Basraisa ba'omer l'nesua, because the case over here she was already married, and he says I'm giving the property to you and then to somebody else. So he's specifically excluding the husband and saying it should go to the acharayich. So then Abai said Habal motzi miad halokeach. The husband, he can take it from the lokeach. In bol ladun imo yacholhu lizchos bedin shu lokeach rishon. The husband is considered the first lokeach of her property, and he can take from this other lokeach. However, in this case, v'acharayich, like we said, it's in a suah. We're going to say this in the Gemara, but the acharayich can take it from the husband. Yochel hosim yad habal, he can take it from the husband. Techi amar Abaya ein lacharayich b'makom habal klum. Because when did Abaya say the acharayich cannot take it when there's a husband? Shenasan lakashi penuya v'nisis. That's if the property was given to her when she was single, then she got married, so then the husband can take it. It doesn't go to that other person. But if somebody says to a married woman, it's after you, it's going leploni, then he's clearly saying to her as follows, acharayach likni bal lo likni, that the acharayach should take it and not the husband. But then what did it say? It said v'lokeach miyad acharayach, but the lokeach actually can take it from the acharayach, because the real purchaser, just like Rav Shimon Gamliel said, when a person sells it, that's a real sale. Rav Shimon de Amar de mechira sarishon mechira, that is really a mechira, and in the end, ultimately, it's going to go to that lokeach. Umukminan la biyada de lokeach ein bezdin is kakim b'pam azos and bolo. Now this time around, it came to the lokeach again. We don't then say that it can be taken away from him. This is not like the first time. In other words, the first time in the cycle, so there she sold it and the husband can take it from the lokeach. That's that in that case. There the lokeach got the property because it was sold to him. And the husband can say, well, I really am the first purchaser for my wife. But when the lokeach then takes it away from the acharayich, shein habal zocha etzlo b'din, and we know the husband cannot defeat the acharayich in court. Ein bezin is kakin labal. There, the bezin does not listen to the husband at all. Kedekamar time ilakameh, like we're going to say later on. And so, therefore, in this particular case, it actually ends up in the hands of the lokeach. And the Gemara now continues and says, well, what's the difference over here? We're saying that again, in this case, it goes to she sells it to the lokeach, the husband takes it from the lokeach, the acharayach takes it from the husband, the lokeach takes it from the acharayach, and we don't say that it keeps going until they reach a compromise, we say the lokeach gets it. But in our Mishnah, we had a similar situation, and we said it keeps going forever, and they have to compromise. What's the difference from our Mishnah, which says, then anytime you have a situation again where one is collecting and then one collects from that one and goes around in circles, that keeps going forever until they compromise. And to that the Gemara answers, Hasam isluhup seidalakulu. Over there really is a loss of money involved to everybody. Over there we were talking about the collection of a ksuba, that's the collection of a debt, and different parties have different claims to that debt, so in such a situation they have to reach a compromise. But over here in this particular case, lokeachu de isleip seid, it's only the purchaser that has a loss of money. Everybody else is getting this property as a gift. I'm giving the property to you, then it'll go to so-and-so, then she goes and sells it to somebody. It's only that purchaser who spent money who really stands to lose, so he will ultimately get the property. And the Gemara continues, Azal Rafram Amar L'Shmaita Kame de Rav Ashi. Rafram came and he said over this sugya, this teaching, in front of Rav Ashi, and he said as follows, Mi Amar Abaya Hachi. This is the same question that Rashi already addressed. Did Abaya really say this halacha? Here it seems to be that Abaya is saying that the Acharayich can defeat the Baal. But before Abaya said that the Baal can defeat the Acharayich. V'yamar Abaya, but didn't Abaya say, Nechasai loch v'acharayich leploni amda v'nisis, that in a case where a person says, my property goes to you, and then it goes to so-and-so, and then amda v'nisis, she gets up and she gets married, Baal lokeach havi, then the Baal is considered a purchaser, v'yein la'acharayich, b'makom Baal klum, and the Acharayich is not able to defeat the Baal in court. And here we're saying that the Acharayich is able to defeat the Baal in court, and the Gemara answers exactly what Rashi said, Amar lei said to him, Hasam di Amar lokashi penuya. Over there the case was where he makes this deal with her when she is single. Then she gets married, then the husband is going to prevail in court. But over here, Damar Lakashi Nasua, he makes this arrangement when she's already married, so it's clear that he's excluding the husband. My Kamar, what is this person saying to the wife? My Kamar, what's he saying to her? Acharayich likni, balo likni. I wanted to go to the Acharayich, I do not want it to go to your husband, and therefore the husband is going to be defeated in court in this particular situation. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, V'chein Baal Chov. At the end of the Mishnah it says similarly by a Baal Chov and similarly by a wife that is a Baal Chov. It was unclear what that meant. The Gemara says Tana was taught V'chein Baal Chov Ushnei Lekuchos. The same would be true if you had a creditor with two purchasers. Rashi will explain this. V'chein Isha Balas Chov Ushnei Lekuchos. And the same if you had a wife who was a creditor and there were two purchasers. Again, Rashi will explain. Rashi says V'chein Baal Chov Ushnei Lekuchos Ruvain Noshe B'Shimon Moned. The case over here is Ruvain's owed 100 from Shimon, v'lo shtei sados, u'machron l'shnayim, zu b'chamishim, v'zu b'chamishim. And the person who owes the money, he sells two of his fields, and they're each 50. So the combination of the two fields can cover the 100 of debt. Because of Balchov l'lokeach sheni. Now, the Balchov, the creditor, says to the second purchaser, Dinu devar mein limach, I'm not going to contest this from you, I'm not going to take away your field. So Balchov notel miyad harishon. So the Balchov can't take from the second purchaser, but he can take from the first. The kanein lomer hinachti makom sheteg mehemenu. Now, the first purchaser can't say, I left you a free field to collect from, because he didn't leave him a field, because the field's only worth 50. Sharei chovo keneget shtein, he's owed 100, that's the equal to the value of both of the fields. Now, what will then happen is you're going to take it away from the lokeach rishon, and the lokeach rishon will then take away the field from the lokeach sheni, because he has precedence, he was the first buyer. And then the creditor can take the second field from that first, from the first purchaser. The lokeach sheni mi balchov, but now the lokeach sheni, he's going to be able to take from the balchov because he was promised dinu devar mainly, that I'm not going to contest you. The balchov told the lokeach sheni that. And that's going to go on forever until they make a compromise. That's why it's similar to the case in our Mishnah by the Ksuba as well, where it was a case of chozrin chalila ad sheyasu pshara. And then the Mishnah said the same is true by if the wife is a creditor, meaning to say shahaya lachov ksubas al bala. Let's say she's a creditor because she's owed the ksuba. Umachar shtei sados of l'shnayim, and again the same kind of case. He sells his fields, two of them to two people. Ve'in b'shneim alakadei ksubas, and those two fields only add up to the value of her ksuba, exactly the same. V'chas v'l'sheni din dvar mainly imach, and she writes to the second one of the purchasers that I'm not going to contest it. So ha'isha motzia miyad lokeach rishon, she can take from the first purchaser. V'hu min hasheni, and then the first will take from the second. V'ha'isha min harishon, and then she will then take that one from the first. V'hasheni min ha'isha, and then the second purchaser will be able to win in court from the wife because of the promise of dinu devarim ein li alecha. V'lokeach rishon miyad sheni, and again the lokeach rishon will take from the sheni. The chozrin chalila, that goes on forever, and again they're going to reach a compromise. Hadran aloch misha hayanasoy. That is the end of the 10th parak of Mesechet Kesubos. If you're enjoying these videos and this channel, please like, share, and subscribe, and please take a look at the description box below to see how you can support this channel. And we will now begin the 11th parak of Mesechet Kesubos. And the parak begins with the Mishnah, Almana nizones minichse yisomim. And Almana, a widow, she is supported from the property of the orphans which they inherited from their father who died. Ma'aseh yodea shalahen. And the Mishnah says her earnings, it goes to them, it goes to the yisomim. V'yein chayavin b'kvuras, and they're not chayav in her burial. Yorsheha, Yorshek Ksubas, and the Mishnah says those who inherit her, the ones who take her Ksuba, Chayavin Bikvurasa, they are the ones that are Chayiv in her burial. And Rashi over here explains, Almana Nizones Ein Chayavin Bikvurasa, again the Yisomim are not Chayiv to take care of her burial. In Mesa, if she dies, Shara Yorsheha Govin Ksubasa, Mi Yorsheha Baal, because those who inherit her, they're going to collect her Ksuba from the Yorsheha Baal, V'alein Lekover, they're the ones that will have to take care of the burial. Because the husband, because he inherits the dowry of her ksuba, so he is chayiv to bury her. But now that he's no longer inheriting her because he has died, so now she should take care of her own burial. And the Gemara says, they had the following question, Nizones Tanan o Hanizones Tanan. How do we learn the Mishnah? Is it that an almana is supported from the property of the Isomim, or are we talking specifically about an almana which is supported from the property of the Isomim? Rashi over here says, Anshe Golil hayu kosvin at tehayasaft bevesi umitzunam in chosai kol yemei megar melusayich bevesi. So the way the Anshe Golil would write the ksuba, it used to say that again, if he dies, so she would be allowed, you're going to be allowed, the wife is allowed to stay in my house, in the husband's house, and can be supported from my property all the time that you are a widow. So in other words, the Anshe Galil would promise that she would be supported from the estate of the late husband. But Anshe Yehuda Hayukosin, but the Anshe Yehuda, they would write it differently. They would write Anshe Yirtzu Hayorshin Liten Lach Ksubasech. You're going to be supported from my estate until the Yorshim give you your Ksuba. Lafikach Imratzu Hayorshin. Therefore, if the Yorshim want to, Nosin Lach Ksubasa, they can give her the Ksuba. Upochinosa, and then they no longer have to support. So there was a distinction between the Anshe Galil, who said she always has to be supported by the estate of her late husband, and the Anshe Yehud, who said no. Once she gets the ksuba, she no longer needs to be supported. And so the Gemara's question is, what exactly is our Mishnah saying? Is it saying nizones or hanizones? Nizones tnan uch Anshe Galil. Is it saying that she is supported following the Anshe Galil? V'lo sagidilo yahavila. There's nothing they can do. They have to support her. Oh, Dilmar maybe hanizones tanan. What it really means is an almana who is supported, uch Anshe Yehuda, and according to that, it would be following the Anshe Yehuda. That in other words, they don't have to support her, but if they are supporting her, v'bo lo yahavila. If they want, they don't have to give it to her. And Rashi over here explains, Hanizones Tanan, the other way to learn is if she is being supported, V'achi Katani means as follows, Almana Hanizones Minechse Yisomim, if you have an Almana who's being supported from the property of the Yisomim, Maisi Yadesh Alehem, so then her earnings go to them. Kolzman Shem Rotzim Lazona, as long as they are supporting her, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tzadi Vav Amud Aleph.